if you just come to work every day or you come to whatever you're doing every day, just hammering a nail in, and you don't know the bigger context, or you don't know that like what you're hammering a nail into is going to make something that you want to be living in, then you got to stop, right? And I think that's the other part of this is like, it's really important to take a step back from what you're doing, to measure it, to understand it and appreciate, like, is this leading me, closer or further away from my objective? So having objective, super, super important as part of, execution. The biggest challenge in AI is going to be prioritization.
Okay.
I think like everyone talks about AI, and I hear about all these layoffs that all the big firms are planning on taking, but I don't hear a tremendous amount about specifics about how they're going to do that. But I think where the rubber meets the road is to really apply it intelligently.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Execution Exchange. I'm Jake, and as you may know, my goal with this channel is to bring you engaging, thought-provoking, and inspiring guests who can share their thoughts, opinions, their experiences about their execution, setbacks, and successes. So with that in mind, I have another fantastic guest who I'm about to introduce. But before I do that, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and do that right now. As an elite executor, you already know how important it is to take action immediately, and my request is to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. So I appreciate that. Seriously though, every one of you does make a difference, so would greatly appreciate your support. Be sure to hit the like button, as well as leaving a comment or any sort of feedback that you have from me or my guests. I've only published a couple of episodes so far, and I've had a few emails with some excellent feedback that we already started to incorporate right away. Getting that constructive feedback and suggestions is fantastic for me because it keeps wins in my sails, so keep that up. My guest this week is Rob McMahon. As you'll soon hear, Rob is an old colleague of mine from 25 plus years ago when I was just a young buck at GE Capital. Rob took me under his wing for reasons I'll never know, but for which I'm eternally grateful. For a couple of years, Rob served as sort of a mentor, even though we never really put that label on it. I'm sure he didn't see it that way. But for me, having recently joined corporate America after my time in the Marine Corps, his insights were invaluable in helping me make that transition. Rob's one of those guys you have to be wary of because he's so nice, and you might even say disarming. He's like the assassin gunslinger in the old Westerns who would sit down at the end of the bar quietly, just observing everything that's going on, but having complete confidence that if he had to, he could kill everybody in there. So you can bet your ass he's usually the smartest guy in the room. He's a keen judge of character and a devil on the financial details. Nothing ever gets past Rob. At the same time, though, you never feel inferior around him. He has a way of making everybody on his team feel included. And I've worked for a lot of people in the 20 plus years since our careers took different directions and we parted ways, but very few have been on Rob's level. I always felt like he would be in my corner and support me no matter what or where I was. That's the kind of leader that we should all aspire to be. Now, after a 17-year run at GE Capital, Rob joined Encina Capital in 2016, which was still at that point basically a startup. And he worked in a series of vital operational roles, all the way up to and including COO, where he was central in their dynamic growth as Encina ultimately built out 4 different lending portfolios. True to form, Rob jumped from success to another opportunity where he recently joined Ankura Consulting as a senior manager and a senior managing director to take on the role of global chief growth officer. So I have no doubt that he'll be successful there as he has been everywhere else. So without further ado, Rob McMahon. Okay, Rob McMahon, welcome to Execution Exchange.
Thank you, Jake. Good to see you.
Awesome, man. So where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in Fairfield, Connecticut, actually working from the home office today. So
Nice.
It's right on the eve of the 4th of July weekend.
Right.
So trying to get some things done.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You're a Fairfield guy, right? I mean, you're born and raised or grew
Yeah.
up there?
No, born in the Bronx,
Okay.
actually, and raised on Long Island. But yeah, I went to Fairfield U for undergraduate school, and met my wife Kristen at Fairfield U.
Okay.
And I have 2 daughters that went to Fairfield U. So
Oh,
the
man, you're
family lineage at the university is
putting a lot of
strong.
money into the program. That's good.
There's 13 McMahons and Dodges that have gone to Fairfield U. So definitely a lot of tuition dollars invested, about 2 miles down the road.
Money well spent
Yeah,
for sure.
thank you,
Well, this is
thank you.
great. I know you're busy. I want to talk about, I know you recently kind of left one long-standing relationship with Encina Capital and moved into something else. I want to get into that, but before I do, and I've said this to the first couple of guests I've had, when I'm trying to think about how do you kickstart a podcast, who do you bring on, which, you can talk about execution with, and your name immediately came to the top of mind, as somebody who's
Thank
a
you,
known sort of
thank you,
action taker, a get it done
thank you.
kind of
I
executive.
appreciate
And
that.
I'm hoping you can share
Yeah,
some of your,
thank
some of
you.
those insights with our audience today.
Thank you. No, great. Glad to do it. I appreciate being considered in that in circle of people that you think that way about. I was going to ask you, what am I doing here? So, but thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with that word, right? I mean, one of the things I'm kind of interested in exploring is when people use when if I say, well, sometimes you hear people say, well, we got the strategy, now we got to do is we got to execute. Like when you hear that phraseology, what kind of video plays in your mind? I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, it probably has negative and positive connotations. It's a little like it's one of those words that I don't know what the good replacement word would be, but like when people say you need to network more, like when you're a young person, and I like to transform things into other synonyms that make them a little more appealing. So instead of saying networking, if you tell a young person, go make some friends, that sounds more inviting and more appetizing.
Sure.
I think when I think of execution, yeah, like let's go do some things. Let's accomplish some things. Let's reach some goals. Let's make this situation better. Let's build something.
Mhm.
I think that's how I think about execution. So I mean, ultimately execution is about a series of steps that do need to be executed. But I think the one thing it probably took me too long to figure some of this out. But like you got to have fun in doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So when I think of execution, I try to tilt the conversation a little bit. Like I like to get under the hood of like what needs to be done, but like why are we doing it, and who are we doing it with? Like I think if you don't know those two ingredients, then best laid plans, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Don't don't
That's the heart of
don't.
leadership is bringing other people
Yeah,
along, right? I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah,
you got this
100%.
vision, but you gotta create a shared, vision so that everybody can kind of buy into it and take those actions.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely,
that's awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, that's helpful. I don't want to go too far back because you and I go pretty far back, but we first met at GE Capital, geez, nearly 25 years ago, maybe. And you did 15 years at GE Capital. And one of the things we actually first initially met in the Lean Sigma program. I, I
Hmm.
worked for
Yeah.
you, at
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I remember.
so one of the things you achieved in your career at GE was this quality leader kind of status. I mean, there's green belts and there's black belts and master black belts, and then there's like the quality leader. I mean, this is like this is there are very few of these guys. And you're Catholic, so it's like you're a cardinal basically, and you're not the actual pope, but you're an actual cardinal within
Yeah.
the I don't know. That's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
match.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a prestigious kind of level of achievement. I mean, can you maybe? And I think that's very directly related to kind of execution and project management. It's very project oriented. These projects need to be moved along. I mean, can you maybe kind of, if anybody, people may not be very familiar with the Lean Sigma, kind of the domain area of
Yeah.
expertise. So
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
you could share a little bit about how that's maybe shaped your ability to execute over the years.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that memory out. So yeah, I did it. I did achieve quality leader, but if I remember the pecking order on things, like we were trying to spread the word. I'll keep going with the religious metaphor, I guess. We were evangelizing, the merits of Six Sigma. And really all of it was about, when you boil it all down, is continuous improvement. So I like to take a page out of Warren Buffett. I'm a big fan of his, and he has this really cool way of boiling things down into simple things. And I think that's helpful for me to remind myself, like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this? And really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to make things better. And so, yeah, there was a bit of a hierarchy. The people who were in the rank and file got to be green belts. They would take on a project to try to fix something in their world, and they were supported by black belts, master black belts, and quality leaders, and all it was just sort of, management layers of trying to bring common sense and statistical rigor to try to help make things better. The thing that was interesting and challenging, for us, as you well know, is that we were embedded within GE Capital, and GE Capital, unlike the industrial side, we weren't making widgets. We
Mhm.
were renting money, as
Processing
they say.
loans. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in the corporate finance world that we came out of too, it wasn't like the credit card business. So where we had, several thousand customers, and they were each charging, 20 things a month kind of. So there wasn't a lot of transactions. It was, a group that maybe made 20 to 50 loans a year. So like it starts to break down some of the statistical meaningfulness of the approach, but there's high level aspects of it, I think, that are always, usable and workable in any context. And that was the part that, I think ultimately was a great learning experience to sort of learn a lot about statistics, learn a lot about the rigor, learn about what you can apply, but don't just apply it because you can apply it if it's helpful and useful to improving a situation. So I think we disregarded a lot of the deep rigor
Yeah.
elements of the stats, like we didn't do any pair T testing, and like, but we did a lot of basic, like, hey, does this make sense? And should we just do it? Should
Yeah.
we just fix it? And like, let's monitor it and see if we improved some time and productivity, or whatever the, measurable was. So I
My
think it was a mindset.
Yeah,
I think it was a
that's kinda
mindset,
what I was gonna say is, like, looking back on it, um, it it was more to me a great example of kinda, like, managing projects in a matrix environment. I mean, you're trying to affect change on people. You're trying to affect change in an environment, working with a group of people, none of whom really report to you. You have to influence them to take these actions. You have to, create this vision and say, "This is gonna be better. I know these workshops are kind of a pain. I know this is hard to whiteboard this out. I know this seems boring." I mean, it was just kind of like a very good training bed, I would say, for like a future
Yeah,
executive,
yeah.
because you had to learn, you can't just tell these people to do this stuff. You have to bring them along, with you
Yes.
on the
Yes.
process. That to me, I think, was really one of probably the most valuable, more so than the statistical stuff, which is
Yeah.
beneficial. But like you said, that only really kind of applies, A, if you have the data, and two, if it's really even necessary. You can make a lot of
Yeah.
change well short of
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
access to all that stuff.
Look, I agree. I think there's a small handful of things I kind of learned over the years. I'm a team sport kind of person. I played a lot of soccer growing up. It's 11, guys or gals playing against another 11, and each of those sides probably has a bench of another 5 to 10. And it's a team sport, and I think life's a team sport. Everybody's got a position and a role, and you got people specializing in different things, whether it's offense or defense or goalie or what have you. And I think, you know, finding out what's motivating people, like, and whether you're the coach or the captain or just a field player, like, I think everybody has a role. And I think at the end of the day, like, Six Sigma for me was about using the influencing skills to assess the lay of the land in terms of people, who's capable of doing what, and then who are the key people to sort of make change happen. Who are the people who are resisting, who are the people who are supportive, and then what are we going to do to get everybody mobilized in the same direction. And and then the other major thing I'd say I learned was, I had one, maybe he was the pope, in this analogy. So the quality leader of quality leaders for equipment finance at the time at GE, and he was very fond of saying, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there." And he would say it over and over, and to the point of, like, complete annoyance. But he said it enough times that you kind of adopt it as a mantra, and, you realize in the simplicity of it all, it's true, right? Like, if you just come to work every day, or you come to whatever you're doing every day with, you just hammering a nail in, and you don't know the bigger context, or you don't know that, like, what you're hammering a nail into is gonna make something that you wanna be living in, then you got to stop, right? And I think that's the other part of this is like, it's really important to take a step back from what you're doing, to measure it, to understand it and appreciate, like, is this leading me, closer or further away from my objective? So having objective, super, super important as part of, execution, and certainly a big part of Six Sigma was measurement.
Right.
So,
Hey, it's Jake, the host of Execution Exchange and co-founder at Mission Driven Leadership. Hey, are you an ambitious executive in a PE-backed company? Maybe you're leading a turnaround or some other high-pressure situation that requires results now with zero margin for error. If you're under real pressure to deliver results, you might be interested in my 8-week private one-on-one coaching program called Momentum Accelerator. This program is proven to dramatically transform your ability to generate momentum quickly and sustain it on critical projects that can't afford to stall or miss their target. Every highly successful business leader in history, from Musk to Bezos, Jobs, Welch, Ford, Carnegie, Rockefeller, all of them, they all possessed a high bias for action. In fact, bias for action is the single most important ingredient in every high achieving person in almost any context, whether that's a business leader or an elite athlete. But it's not just any kind of action. You see, there are 6 different dimensions to action bias, and they are always present among highly successful operators in a context where failure is not an option. Now, the good news is that once you learn to recognize and adopt and apply these, it's like discovering a superpower. In my one-on-one program, I teach you to recognize the everyday, even mundane moments when any of these 6 critical dimensions might be required. And I'll also work with you to meet that moment by taking the right actions. As you can imagine, I only have time to work with a handful of executives in a one-on-one context like this. So if you want more information, either about the 6 critical bias for action dimensions and how they'll help you become a better, more decisive, and successful executive, shoot me an email and I'll send you more details. That email address is jake@getmissiondriven.com. All right, let's get back to the show. So 15 years at GE Capital, I mean, when that thing basically, did you get off the ship before it went down, or were you riding
yeah.
it down before you made
Yeah,
the jump?
so both actually. So I was, I joined in 2000, came originally to do turnaround, restructuring work,
Mhm.
doing cash flow lending and trying to get our money back when things weren't going quite right. Classic GE, got asked to do that for a little while, and then, "Hey, what about the Six Sigma thing? Hey, how about a stint in HR hiring, 200 people? How about we move you to finance to work for
Yeah,
the
GE's like
CFO of,
that. If you're good,
Co."
if you're good at
So,
anything, they'll just
yeah,
well,
and then
he's already
yeah.
figured these 2 things out. Let's throw him at this other thing. Let's throw him at another
Yeah, so
problem.
that was the great part, right? Like, that was the great part and the scary part. So, like, I got to, 17 years, soup to nuts, actually.
Okay.
So, I'd say 8 of it was, like, banking,
Hmm.
and my core domain expertise, and then the other half were these general management roles. Like, from that standpoint, like, invaluable experience to sort of have both of those dynamics, and then GE made the decision that they didn't wanna be, like a bank anymore.
Yep.
So they were gonna sell off the capital businesses, and they asked, many of the executive rank and file to stick around through the sale process and the spin out process, and, was glad to do that through, it was probably late 2016.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and that set the stage for what happened next, which was with, was getting back together with a couple of GE executives, Paul Bossidy and Willie Brasser,
Yep.
and
Paul
then reconnect.
Bossidy of the
Yeah.
Larry Bossidy.
Yeah, so Paul, yeah, is the son of
Yep.
Larry, and, Larry was a longtime GE person and eventually the CEO of, Allied
Yeah.
Signal, Honeywell, I
A
believe.
legendary executor,
Yeah,
literally, like,
yeah.
wrote the book on execution, in the early
Yeah,
90s. I mean,
yeah,
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 oh, yeah. I mean,
and Paul, I've never spent any time with Larry Senior, and Paul is one of a number of kids, and Paul ran, GE Commercial Equipment Finance, which was the largest equipment finance business in the world. It had about, I think it was $1 billion in net income,
ugh,
when he left GE to go do other things. But yeah, Paul was always somebody I had nothing but a great deal of admiration and respect for. And so, jumped at the opportunity to work with him and Willie Brasser, who was a risk he was a chief risk officer for Capital Americas, and also somebody I respected. And they're very different and very very good
Good.
at both at what they do, and what they do is different. I would say Willie is a relentless. Um, he's a terrific risk manager, but he's relentless in terms of like levels of curiosity, in terms of ripping and tearing on numbers, assessing situations. Just a really great, very keen mind.
Yeah.
And for somebody who's quasi retired, like I've never seen any work ethic quite like it. And then Paul, is just a really great strategic mind. He's a really engaging people person, tells a good story. He's always just he's a very good read of the room. And then Andy Salter was new to me. So I first, met him, and it was probably around the 2016 timeframe when they were just launching Encina Business Credit, which was the first of what became 4 platforms that got launched under Encina. And he was an ex Oaktree Capital Management, partner, and, really creative, very, very smart, and just, also like, hardworking and relentless, but in a very fun, and in an engaging way.
But how,
He's
let me
he's
just
very
ask you, because I mean,
self-deprecating.
this seems like two different
Yeah,
worlds, right? You're going from the
yeah,
corporate,
totally,
I mean,
yeah,
going from
totally,
General Electric to
yeah,
what is
yeah,
basically a startup. I mean, did you have some
totally,
reservations about,
yeah, yeah,
making that
not
kind of move?
yeah. Not basically, it was a startup. I mean, 100% startup. No, actually, I was ready for it, and in hindsight, in some ways, I wish there was a way to get all the experience I got at GE and do a startup kinda earlier too. Like, it just it w it was it's a wild ride, right? Like, nothing ever goes 100% as you plan it out. Like, just the way it works. There's always going to be some headwind, some challenge. And then there's going to be tailwinds too that, are unexpected. And I think when you have a really great team of people who are able to sort of rally together when you're facing a headwind, that's probably one of the most important things that I learned. Like, there's very few things you can't overcome when you have enough firepower and, enough desire, and obviously a decent strategy is super helpful too. But, yeah, so it was a blast,
So take us. So when you joined them, they had
Yeah,
a business funding practice basically, but they had a
yeah,
vision for additional
yeah.
funds or additional lines of business. I mean, kind of how to take us through that progression and how
Sure,
you, because
sure.
you were basically the COO, if I remember right, right? I mean, you were
Yeah,
brought in to.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I initially got brought on to be the chief operating officer across what were 2 platforms at the time: the Encina Business Credit, which was an asset-based lending platform, that launched in 2016, and I started in this role as a COO, in 2017. And the second platform had just launched, was the, Encina Equipment Finance platform that did equipment lending and leasing.
And just for maybe
So
our listeners who
yeah,
don't understand that word platform, I mean, it's just a different line of business, right? I mean, you're targeting a different group of customers to, to support or to lend to. So, I mean,
correct.
basically,
So
y-
each business had its own CEO,
mhm.
each business had its own CFO, each business had its own chief risk officer, operations group, risk and underwriting, etcetera. So they were run as separate independent businesses. And so, my role initially was to sort of help, oversee that and continue the rollout and implementation, because I think business credit maybe had, I don't know, 10 or 12 employees at the time, and equipment finance had 5,
Yeah.
so, and very little assets under management at that point. So I initially got brought on to do that, and then very quickly, after about 6 months, the board, which included, members from Oaktree and our management team, the names I just mentioned before, said, "Hey, you know what? We really would like to turbocharge the growth at business credit. Would you transition to dedicate your focus to business credit, and growing that platform?"
So how,
So yeah.
what did that challenge mean? And I mean, what was the strategy? What were some of the goals or targets, if you remember? I mean, did it seem manageable or was it daunting or what kind of, what were you being
Yeah.
asked to do?
Yeah, like, it's like one of those things that, daunting, like, so, like, you don't spend any time thinking about it when you're in that moment, right? Like, you're like, you feel like you're up for the challenge and you just kinda start having at it, I would say. What were the goals? I mean, the goals were, I'm not sure what the assets under management at the time were, but it wasn't much, it might have been 100 million or less. And, maybe there were 5 to 10 employees of business credit. Um, I just can't remember completely, but, by the time we sold the platform in 2021, 5 years later, yeah, I think we had 7 or 800 million of outstandings and 1.6 billion or 5 of commitments, and, probably close to 40 or so employees. And yeah, so what was my role in that? It was to try to sensibly grow. Like, this is always the teeter-totter, right, in lending. Like, you wanna grow and you wanna grow rapidly, but you don't wanna do it by just throwing junk at the wall,
Right.
right? So, because then you have
You got
losses, which
problems.
creates a whole other
Yeah.
problem, right? So you need to hire domain experts who are very good at understanding, in this case, the asset-based lending space, but also where they're going to find their deals.
Yeah.
And so, we had maybe, 2 or so salespeople, and we grew that team to 10 or 12, and we had, 1 or 2 underwriters, and we grew that team to, 6 or so, 7, and then we needed portfolio people, and we grew that too. So these were people who were in my Rolodex. They were many people I knew. Some in some cases, there were a couple that were already there that I knew well. That helped with, camaraderie and just being able to cut to the heart of things. But yeah, like, from there, it was like, okay, we know the goal is to grow and to go from 100 million, to a billion. How are we going to do that? And so the development of a sales strategy, a measurement system using Salesforce or another CRM we did use Salesforce for a variety of reasons, that literally had to design Salesforce from scratch, which was an interesting,
Okay.
process. But you can't digitize junk, right? Like, you have to digitize real metrics, and you have to digitize from a salesperson's perspective. If you create a measurement system that's solely for the benefit of the CEO or the board, like, you're never going to get adoption. So, like, one of the things that we did pretty quickly was, like, we said, what do the salespeople want? What do they need as a tool? Let's start with that. And so you get your hands dirty. You're sitting in the trenches, working side by side, asking the salespeople, who do you think you should be calling? Who do you think you shouldn't be calling? What is a meaningful contact with somebody? Or is it a phone call? Is it a meeting? I mean, like, this is pre-COVID. So these were the discussions and the granular discussions that we were having about just how to execute around getting from here to here, and what were the drivers to do that.
But you said so much here, which is fascinating. I mean, number one, it's team building, right? It's bringing in the
Yeah.
right kinds of people or working with the people that you have to get them in the right slots. Everybody's the right person in the right seat on the bus, kind of a thing, which goes a long way. If you've got the right people, they kind of will instinctively know what to do, or they'll be on their toes, kind of leaning into the work that's required. But I would imagine that because you're feeling your way along, just the nature of it, I mean, you'd have a lot of differing opinions about,
Yeah,
who we should
yeah,
go after, who we should be talking to, how many times should we be
yeah,
talking to them? I mean, like,
yeah, yeah,
give
yeah,
us some
true.
examples of maybe some execution struggles where there's some
Sure,
disagreement, or there's some
sure.
potential, what I would call maybe misalignment, amongst the
Yeah,
team.
I would say, like, probably one of the most fundamental tensions that, it was probably initially unhealthy, and we made it healthy, was that, we had a CEO and a chief risk officer who were very regimented in how they thought about risk. And so their expectations for what the work product was that needed to be produced to have a sensible conversation about, like, should this be a customer, or not? Because asset-based lending, you're lending against collateral. So, you want to make sure the collateral is real, and you want to make sure it's sufficient. And so we had a sales team that, out of the GE sales culture, there was a lot of really strong risk support. So in an entrepreneurial environment, you didn't have that like multi-layered risk support where you could flip them a memo and have a risk person make a pretty slide presentation and justify why the deal should be done. So we leaned on our salespeople more heavily to be risk
Right.
focused,
Yep.
and that came with a lot of pushback. And it's to the point where eventually, like, there's no half-ass in it, right?
Right.
Like you're either doing it one way or you're doing it another way.
Yeah.
Right, and the one way, which was half-assing it in terms of the work product that would be produced to the CEO and the chief risk officer, wasn't working.
Mhm.
Like, we just weren't getting anything done, and so
Now it's
ultimately,
gonna how do you recognize, I mean, what are some of the indicators that you're looking at to tell you that
well, certainly deals not
yeah,
closing at the
okay, so
time
but that's kind of a
is a
lagging
great
thing, right?
indicator,
I mean,
but
that yeah.
frustration,
Mhm.
like real-time frustration where you hang up on a deal call, and the salesperson's frustrated because they think they have a legitimate deal, and the CEO and the CRO are frustrated because they're like, "That's a piece of garbage,"
Uh,
or maybe it's not, but I don't have enough information. So there's a lot of these, like, maybe it's not, but I don't have enough information, come on back, and the salesperson thinking they were just wasting their time trying to pull together the information. So like finally, like we worked on, a pre-screen tool that sort of helped synthesize and get everybody on the same page. But at the end of the day, like it's one of those things. I have another GE boss. He used the term Philadelphia facilitation, which means at some point you just say, "Freaking guys, you're gonna do it this way, or or it's not gonna work." And so facilitated Philadelphia style on that
it's
issue.
kinda like my way or the highway, basically.
Yeah, and because it was not going to work, that we
Mhm.
killed we c there was a natural end to the negotiation,
Yeah.
and it just and in the end, it's funny, like, our number 1 salesperson, who I won't single out, in case he's listening at some point, um, it was who by the way.
Yeah. I think I know who this is.
Yeah, so, but we'll save his name to protect the innocent. To his credit, like, I had a really hard, direct conversation, like, which is probably one of my big lessons learned too is, GE was known for a lot of directness,
Mhm.
coming from the top with Jack in that era. And I was I wasn't sure where I stood on that, like, in the early years, but, as I've gone through life, I realized, like, there's no room for if you know something, like, you can't mince the words over it, and
Mhm.
and you just gotta be straight about it. And so I told this fella straight up, like, "Look, I need you to be better. Like, I just need you to be better on this front. Like, you're already amazing at the really hard part, which is the sell and the talking to people and finessing people and getting feedback and, like, just rejiggering things. Like, you're amazing. Like, no one's better than you at that.
Yeah.
But you're half-assing it on the pre-screen. Like, I need you to
Just set
to
the
use your
example, you know?
background, and you have the he was, he's a trained engineer. I'm like, "It's not like you can't do some work on a spreadsheet.
Right.
So, like, I don't know what you need to do to fix this, but you gotta fix it, like, now,
Wow.
like, right now." And, like, resistance initially, right? Like, it's human nature. Like, no, people generally don't like to hear it initially. To his credit, 1,000%,
Yeah.
like, leaned in on it, like, a week later is a new human being, and he's a beast, like,
But that's yeah, but
he
that's great
you know
leadership, Rob. I mean,
Yeah,
to me, that is
yeah,
great
yeah,
leadership,
oh,
right? It's finding people, like you said. I mean, he's already a top performer, so he's people
mhm,
that other people are looking to, right? Hey, look, this guy doesn't have to do this stuff. Why do I have to do it? But on the other hand, if he is doing it and he's also in the successful group, then maybe there's something to that, right? Maybe I should also use, do it the same way. So I mean, singling him out,
yeah,
having
I
that hard
appreciate you saying it.
conversation,
I appreciate you
that's
saying it like that.
not
I don't feel
easy.
comfortable. Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with you giving me the praise because I feel like I had the easy job, which was I just needed to tell him what the logjam was, right? Like, I just needed to point him in that direction. He needed to do the work, right? Like, in the end, it was up to him. He did it. So, like, I had the easy job,
So many of
so yeah.
it feels easy, but so many leaders won't do it. They don't want
Yeah.
the conflict. Who wants to get on the wrong side of like the top
Fair
sales
point.
guy? You know what I mean? Who
Fair
who
point.
who
Yeah,
wants to
fair
be,
point.
who wants
Yeah.
to be the
Yeah.
person who, is confronting the
Yeah.
person who's
Yeah.
successful in all these other ways, but isn't, basically conforming to an operational requirement. It's kind of like, I mean, I don't know. The lending business is just full of this dichotomy between the risk mindset and the sales mindset. And these
Yeah.
are like these are
It's true.
cats and
It's
dogs,
true.
they're
It's
just
true.
they're
It's
just
true.
completely different. That's awesome. All right, listen,
Yeah.
I want to just briefly because
Yeah.
you grew the Encina platform. A couple of those were sold, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they've moved on from those. I mean, it's an amazing story. Let's go on and on about that. But I know you've just started a new role with Ankura,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
don't have a whole lot you can share with that because it's all brand new. But
Yeah.
it's exciting, right? I mean, this is a
Oh, it's great. No, it's amazing. I'm learning a ton. So Kevin Lavin, the CEO of Ankura, and I know each other for a long time. Been in the turnaround and restructuring circles. I think we probably met around 2000 when I first joined GE. And he reached out to me and said, "Here's how here's what we're doing. Here's how we're doing it. And I think we could benefit from some of your background in terms of the Fortune 500 organizational context about operating rhythm that we had at GE and maybe some of the Six Sigma stuff. But then also he really loved the entrepreneurial aspects of what I had been doing because Ankara really was built from, it's an amalgamation and acquisitions over time of people and business practices. And it's probably 35 or so business practices that were assembled under one roof and started out as 10 people 9 or so years ago. And now it's over 2000. So, yeah, so I'm doing my darndest to get up to speed on what the practices are doing and how they're doing it. And which of them are adjacent to each other and may be able to do some more import export together in terms of sharing that good news about who they are for their customers so that they can share cross pollination opportunities because there's a lot of law firms, a lot of private equity firms that have benefited from the expertise of a practice or two that have probably benefit from 3 or 4 or 5 practices.
sure.
So,
So is that
so
is
we're
that
working on
is
that,
that
trying to figure that out.
I mean, and I'm sure you do a lot of stuff, but if you had to kind of draw
Yeah.
lasso around it, I mean, that's kind of potential best practices,
Mm,
kind of cross pollination. How can the business
yeah.
grow by working a
Y-
little bit more?
We're still going to grow, through inorganic
Mm.
growth, as we say. We're still going to acquire, but yeah, organically, grow, and then also, like the rest of the world, like we're in the trenches talking about how we're going to use AI and how our customers and clients should use AI. And I spend a bunch of time right now with a platform that we have that's designing a super exciting AI solution for the healthcare arena,
So
and
what's the
it's
execution challenge that you think you're kind of looking at here in the next 6 or 12 months? I mean, where
well
do you
the
think your biggest
execute.
challenges will be?
The biggest challenge in AI is going to be, prioritization.
Okay.
I think, like, everyone talks about AI, and I hear about all these layoffs that all the big firms are planning on taking, but I don't hear a tremendous amount about specifics about how they're gonna do that.
Really?
So I think that, really sort of sums it up for the world right now. We all acknowledge that there's some really cool things that are going on that we can use it for, but I think where the rubber meets the road is to really apply it intelligently. I think with a level of compassion too, like you can't just automate for the sake of automating. Like you're always going to have people involved. There's always going to be, management. And I view it as it's an adjunct to the sales, to the staffing,
Hmm.
of any good, process. But I think trying to figure out where it can be used and where it should be used in the early days will be the hard part.
Yeah. No
So,
doubt. Next.
because I get an AI team like, "Hey, what can we do with this?" And they're like, "Everything." I'm like, "Everything? Well, that's great. Well, give me one thing." Well, you can pick anything. You will do it. I'm like, "Okay." So then I go to our business leaders like, "Hey, can you pick one thing?" They're like, "Well, I don't know. What can AI do?"
Yeah.
You know?
You just
So
kind of you're talking in circles around it.
so we just need to get people, in the intersection together,
Hmm.
and trying to figure out like what should we do first.
That's
So
exciting. I know you'll
yeah,
be traveling a lot because I mean this is a big global business, right? I mean
it
it's
is. That
you're all
is.
over the
Yeah, we've got
place. Have you had
yeah.
a
I've
chance
been in
to get outside of the
DC
U.S.? I
and
know you go to D.C. a
yeah.
bit.
No, not yet.
No.
I talked to London quite a bit. We have a vice chair there that's in charge of international,
Okay.
and I'm sure I'll wind up over there at some point soon.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
awesome. Well, I'd love to have you. I'd
yeah,
love to have you on. Maybe after you've been there a little while and you've, got
absolutely,
some stuff.
absolutely.
Okay, that's all I got for you this week. I hope you learned something or at least found something inspirational to propel you along. Be sure to follow and subscribe and request notifications wherever you are watching or listening so that you can receive those updates when we post new stuff. We have a lineup of excellent guests coming up over the next week, and I know you're not going to want to miss anything. Do me a favor also, if you found this interesting or again thought-provoking or inspirational, leave me a like or a very positive, thoroughly uplifting, and effusive comment. On the other hand, if you don't have anything nice to say, better just keep that to yourself. Actually, I do want your feedback either way, and any suggestions that you have on how to improve the product are always welcome. This episode has been brought to you in part by Mission-Driven Leadership, because while strategy is important, execution matters the most. Mission-Driven's Momentum Accelerator coaching program transforms business leaders into elite executors by hardwiring the 6 bias for action disciplines in just 8 weeks. With Momentum Accelerator, every project and initiative gains speed quickly and stays on course to deliver meaningful value. If you're a business leader who wants to significantly improve your ability to execute under pressure, send me an email to jake@getmissiondriven.com and I'll send you additional details.